You're live, thank you.
Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Strategy and Resources Committee on Thursday the 3rd of February 2022. I am Councillor Christopher Swain, Vice Chairman of the committee, chairing this meeting in the absence of the Chairman, Councillor Siddall. The meeting is set up to mitigate against COVID, and despite recent changes in general policy, we are still bound by the rules that Council set in April last year. Everybody present here has been asked to ensure that they have passed a lateral flow test with a negative result. Everybody is asked to use masks, particularly when moving around, as the regulations say. This meeting is being streamed, and by being present, you are deemed to have given your consent to being on the recording. During each item, members may indicate that they wish to speak, and when called, please then use your microphone, but switch it off when you have finished to avoid complicating the recording system. The YouTube is dependent on this correct use of microphones. When you do raise a point, please refer to a paragraph or section if relevant. Finally, I'll draw your attention to the notices on the order papers, which concern particularly the means of escape in case of fire behind the stage here, and also the fact that the levels in the chamber do vary a lot, and I particularly draw that to the attention of members of the public who are pleased to see in the chamber again after a long absence. If we move to item 2, apologies for absence. Tara, apologies we have.
Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, members. Thank you. Apologies, Chairman, have been received from Councillor Siddall, and Councillor Stevens is attending as a substitute for Councillor Siddall.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Minutes of the last meeting, which are on pages 5 to 38 of the papers.
Chairman, Councillor Morris in attendance, please. Can the minutes show?
Okay. Be it noted then, Tara, that Councillor Morris is also present.
Yes, of course, Chairman. Thank you.
Right. For minutes of the last meeting then, I move the minutes of the last meeting and ask somebody to second those minutes. Councillor Channer, thank you. So does anybody have any question on the accuracy of the minutes from that meeting? No, do we agree then? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to then disclosure of interests. Members are required to disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interests relating to items of business on the agenda, having regard to paragraphs 5 to 8 of the 6 to 8 of the Code of Conduct from members. Do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Stamp?
Thank you, Chairman. Just that I'm a member of Essex County Council and I have a non-pecuniary interest on agenda item 15.
Councillor Durham?
Thank you, Chairman. Also a non-pecuniary interest as a member of Essex County Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Leggan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Non-pecuniary interest in agenda item number 8. I've had conversations and correspondence from some of the stakeholders regarding this issue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. No. Oh, Councillor Nunn.
Thank you very much, Chair. Also, item 8, in that I'm acquainted with some of the individuals connected with the barge operation. I did raise the issue with Mr. Quelch because of a dispensation from last year, but Mr. Quelch is satisfied that there is no further interest to declare other than a non-pecuniary one. Thank you.
Sure. Right, item 5 on the agenda, public participation. I've been advised there is no item there, no person wishing to take part there or notify that they wish to. So we move to item 6. Supplementary estimates, virements, procurement exemptions and use of reserves. Pages 39 to 42. There's a report from the Director of Resources. I'll pass this over to Mr. Leslie.
Chair. This is a regular report to the committee. All items in this report are for noting on this occasion in accordance with the financial regulations. There has been one supplementary estimate since the last report for £16,000, and this is in relation to a specialist consultant to assist with the negotiations of the waste contract. There have also been 3 procurement exemptions, which are shown in paragraph 3.5.1, and the reasons for those are outlined in the paragraph.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to raise a question on the... Yes, Councillor Fluker.
Just confirm that with regards to 2 and 3, that we specified that they represent value. Thank you.
Mr. Leslie?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, items 2 and 3, the Wi-Fi for the Prom Parks, yes, indeed, because they are required to link in to the existing infrastructure, and they are a key person to do that because of their existing connections to the contract. So that's absolutely a single supply in that respect. In terms of the fire risk assessments, we need to get on with that very quickly, very urgently. There's clearly a health and safety matter involved, so I do feel that that is very much value for money in getting the urgency and putting the safety of everyone first. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Well, we'll move to the recommendations. I'd better read them out. Page 43. The recommendations then, the committee considers and reviews this report. Sorry?
Supplementary violence. One just on page 39. Supplementary violence, that's it. Just keep scrolling.
39.
That's it.
Yeah. Right, 2 recommendations were supplementary estimates as detailed in paragraph 3.4.1 be noted, and that the procurement exemptions as detailed in paragraph 3.5.1 be noted. Agreed? Okay, thank you. We go on to item 7, capital and investment strategies for 2022 to 23 and minimum revenue statement 22-23, pages 43 to 86.
Thank you, Chair. It's a requirement for the Council to have all these strategies in place, and they have been prepared in consultation with our Treasury advisors. The capital strategy at Appendix 1 sets out the capital expenditure and how this will be funded. There is no borrowing requirement, as expenditure will be funded from capital receipts reserve or government grants in the case of disabled facility grants. The new capital bids are shown in Appendix 2 of the report and remain unchanged from those reported to the committee in January. The investment strategy at Appendix 3 is complemented by the Treasury Management Strategy, which comes later in the agenda. And this sets out the Council's estimated maximum investment exposure and return. The minimum revenue provision statement at Appendix 4 sets out how the Council will repay any expenditure financed by borrowing. However, the Council does not have any and is not expected to have any underlying borrowing requirement. There are figures in the table in respect of vehicle lease payments, which for accounting purposes are required to be defined as a MRP payment, minimum revenue provision payment, so relate to vehicle leasing rather than an underlying need to borrow. Thank you.
Right, members, can we progress through these 4 items? Whether anybody has any questions on the capital strategy in Appendix 1. Councillor Dunn?
Sorry, no, Appendix 2. When you get to Appendix 2, please.
Okay, then move on to Appendix 2 then, capital project bids. Any members wish to speak on those? Councillor Nunn.
I'm conscious that I'm new to this committee and that Mr. Leslie has said that these issues were discussed in January. But can I turn to page 50, please, at the top, the service capital bids? Mr. Leslie has previously mentioned leasing. Why are we replacing these replacement vehicles? Is this purchase replacement? Why are we buying vehicles? Have we looked at best value in terms of comparing that to leasing costs over a period of time, please?
Yep. So the options are considered around the vehicles, and the best route really depends on the vehicle and the use of the vehicle. These vehicles tend to stay with us longer, have a longer duration. However, we do have a lease in respect of a tractor, where we've chosen the route of leasing that just because of the wear and tear and repair costs involved. So we assess which option would be the best option. So there's actually a mixture of both. We're not just going down one route regardless.
Happy to let it go this time, Chair, but I think we do need to look at this in a bit more detail in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Nunn. Yes, it is always a difficult, should we say, calculation whether to buy or to lease, and but leasing always has an overall cost that's greater. But obviously, buying means laying out the money sooner. Councillor Fluker.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman.
Page 50.
So, first one, Exemptions, just be mindful of the fact that I don't think that's something that is necessary instruction to charge it right. And I hate Mr. Leslie that you get a terrible shock and find out how much it costs for a piece of equipment to plug it into. So, and I think the council should be committed to getting that this time. So also, while we're looking at infrastructure, maybe this is something that we could work up with some fast chargers in the Park. Mr. Holmes is nodding, so I guess he's really preempting my thinking. I just think with 1 or 2 things that would be good. And as far as the car parks, I mean, this is a huge amount of money. I'm looking at the photographs it looks to me as though the subsidence might be caused by the new trees. If we go ahead and do this, the trees continue to grow. I'm not advocating cutting trees down, but we need to understand what the long-term solution is to this particular problem. And, again, value on both. To me, the PC sums look about right. And then finally, the vertical crouch pontoon renovation. I mean, this comes as a bit of a shock, bearing in mind how long that pontoon has been in. I mean, I years ago, so that seems to me like a lot of money. I wonder if it's money well spent insofar as I seem to remember Burnham looking at past the fact that I suspect the cost to replace that pontoon should be looked at to try and get it replaced in a better quality pontoon. Otherwise, now you have these things deteriorate, we'll be paying 60 grand for 5 years. If it's not the right, if it hasn't been provided to the right construction in the first place, this is just going to be ongoing. So I think it really does need to be looked at.
Yes, thank you. I think on the question of electric vehicles, it is to some extent guessing the future developments, isn't it? In terms of climate change strategy and all that, it's obviously the sort of way to go, but it is open to doubt just what's going to happen to electricity charges when you've got a bulk of vehicles using electricity. But that's not possible to calculate at this stage. Thank you. On the car park, yes, I'd be particularly concerned about Butt Lane sliding down the hill. Yes, well, my feeling is that any trees there would be helping to support it, but there aren't many. I think it's got to be proper concrete pillared buttressing or something. But I think Mr. Holmes will verify what the cost is of losing car park spaces if we were to rope off a whole area there. There was also a question of whether we had any insurance claim on it. I don't know whether we got anywhere with that. It's a possibility. There may be some recovery on insurance.
Actually, on page 74, there's a sort of a picture there that actually shows the damage. So it shows all the trees adjacent to it. So I think it's really something that has to be looked at.
Right. Okay. Is Councillor Stamp?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Fluker. I thought you might say something about the pontoon, so I'm glad you're not disappointing us, and welcome back. It says quite clearly, existing pontoon was installed in 2006 and there's been no maintenance on there whatsoever. So I actually was going to applaud that this council was actually going to invest in Burnham on Crouch for once in a while. Sorry, Mr. Holmes, but there we go. And I think it is. I've had conversations with an officer about the possible uses in the future on how we can get an income if we can get it back up to scratch. So I certainly will support that project. It goes without saying. My area of concern, though, if I do have one, and it is just about the boiler. You know, the replacement boiler. Are we actually going to at the sports centre? Are they going to be new contents in boilers? I mean, I noticed that they're gas. Does that fit in with our climate strategy? Should we be looking at ground source heat pumps or whatever? So they only last, I think it's due to last 10 years. But I do think we need to be cautious that, you know, what was the price? Forgive me, Chairman, 31,000. Is that good value for money, really? Leave the Burnham on Crouch one. I think we'll all agree with that one. but if we can look at if we can actually look at whether that is best value for money in the swimming pool, please. On a serious note, we have to make sure that we're actually adhering to our strategies that we as a council have signed up to. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, I think if I defer to Mr. Holmes on that, the point is that it's a question of potential breakdown and completely sort of putting the leisure centre out of operation in the near term. That's right.
Chairman, can I, before Mr. Holmes comes in, that's not my point. I know why we need to replace it. It's are we actually, you know, looking at the future and making sure we replace it with the correct technology, Chairman. Thank you.
Chairman, if I can help, yes, we've looked at the most cost-effective way to ensure that the centre keeps running for this time being. This is the least cost, but gives us the reliability. Obviously, we're coming towards an option around our leisure centre. So within 2 or 3 years, we'll be looking at the whole centre again in terms of its future, what investment we need to make in that. So I can take your point. Do we spend a lot more money now upgrading a part of the centre, or do we do a minimum cost and then do revisit? So I think that the considered view is we actually go for the least cost at this time. I don't believe that will mean we will waste that money in 2 or 3 years' time, but you're absolutely right. We need to look at the whole centre, the way it's lit and heated as part of our sort of potential revamp on that. So I think this is probably the most cost-effective way for right now to deal with it. there are other technologies. They come with a much bigger price, and I think it needs to be built into a bigger package of measures in the centre itself.
It's almost counts as essential maintenance in a way. But as far as the pontoon's concerned, is the idea of replacing a viable kind of approach to it?
Chairman, yes, we have looked at the pontoon, and just to give reassurance, although we've not spent any money on maintenance, it has been inspected, but this is just general corrosion, wear and tear since 2006. So we've commissioned a report into the condition, looking to see whether this is the most sort of best value to say replace it or repair it. So I think this is the provision to do the larger work, but obviously if we could do less, we would do, providing it's still fit for purpose. But we will be looking at the best value option and to make sure that it stays there and we can deal with it.
Thank you. Councillor Darrell?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to give Councillor Fluker some comfort because I did actually buy a fleet of similar electric vehicles to the Electric Gator, and they're far less sophisticated than modern electric cars, which I think Councillor Fluker has now. And in fact, because they're charged overnight, because they're not used overnight, in fact, they're just usually charged with a 16 amp commando socket. And we actually had a row of 13 amp, and I think they use lead acid batteries still in them, so they are easily and cheaply serviced. And also in respect of the Andrews boiler, again, I had cause to install a boiler for a swimming pool complex, and regrettably, in order to get the required heat output to heat the building and the swimming pool, you're left with very few other options than, and I actually installed an Andrews boiler and Andrews heat air handling equipment, and I just wish that there were other ways of doing it, but at the moment there aren't economical ways, and certainly heat pumps for a thermal demand such as a leisure centre is some way off. Thank you.
Councillor Chan?
Thank you, Chairman. I meant to ask this at the previous committee, actually, it escaped my mind totally. Switching on to the footpath now for the Prom Park, which is, I'm reading it to be the whole length of the entrance road leading right in. And I was just looking at a figure of 25,000. That sounds pretty good to me. It's just that I'm conscious, having sat on the local highways panel, of what things can cost. So sort of, do we feel that's an accurate costing there? Because we're talking about dedicated footpath, which I take it will take the prams and buggies, mobility scooters and everything. We'll have low level bollard lighting along its length. That's the way I read it. I'm just, I'm not doubting anyone, but I just wondered how we arrived at that price and what surface will it be? We're talking obviously a hard surface footpath element, I assume.
Yes, as I understand it, the bollards and the path really go together as a sort of, for safety purposes, as a risk assessment. And the road surface is, well, I look at it frequently, and there isn't much underneath the top surface, which is cracking up. But perhaps Mr. Holmes will have something to say on those items.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have I wasn't involved in the preparation of the budget for this, but I know that our maintenance team will have investigated that and come up with an estimate. So I'm fairly confident what they've asked for will be sufficient. Yes.
Oh, that's good. Well, yes, I'm just thinking of local highways panel history. Thanks.
Thank you. That was on the budgets. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Right, the one of the first things that springs to mind with the electric vehicles is, are the batteries on lease or are they owned? Because I know a lot of these batteries, when they go wrong, they can be very, very expensive to replace. I know somebody bought a brand new Range Rover, and the Range Rover said they didn't charge the batteries correctly. They don't lease them, so it cost them £20,000 to replace the batteries. So that's something that I think we should look into. And this pontoon, is it the one we discussed gifting to the town council, that they just do the crabbing on, or is this another pontoon? Is it that one? Yeah, because I know when this came up with the cost of it, we said, well, couldn't we just gift it to the town council and they can do what they like? But according to this, the report has changed and now we're under a duty to repair it. Is that right?
A duty to repair would be because of safety reasons, wouldn't it?
No. In the previous report, it wasn't. We didn't have to repair it. We discussed the option of just gifting it to the town council and saying do what you like with it. But this report seems to suggest that it's compulsory that we repair it.
I think we certainly came to the conclusion that whether the town council wanted to have anything to do with it or not, it still needed to be put in good order. But perhaps Mr.
Chairman,
said something.
Exactly that. It's an asset of the council. It needs repair regardless of who owns it. And I personally feel if we're going to make that offer to move it on to the town council, it should be made in the spirit of it's in good order before that actually happens. So that's why, rather than pass on that liability effectively.
Right. And is it only the ferry, the privately owned ferry, that uses it?
At the moment, we have that ferry that uses it, but there are other ideas, and we have been discussing in outline potential other ideas.
Could we not get the ferry owners to foot the bill? I'm just looking, thinking, why are we funding it? Sorry to my Burnham members. Why are we funding something if we don't use it? The public don't really use it. Only a private company uses it.
I'm sure Councillor Stamp would be able to reinforce how much it is used, but it is used by a small ferry company, but it is a small company. It's a local business.
How much do we earn out of it? How much? If we're going to spend 60 grand, like the car parks, we had a cough with the cost, but we get a massive amount of revenue. What do we get off of the pontoon?
Very little,
Sorry.
Chairman, but I would say it's an asset, a public asset used by people, children, for crabbing. So it's a local facility, but it doesn't generate a huge income at this moment in time. But there is always the opportunity to explore that. But I don't think the ferry is the major player in the use
So
of
there's
that.
no real cost benefit. This is just effectively a vanity loss.
Well, I think there are two aspects. One about preserving it because it's an important aspect for the town, but also it's one of a number of projects where we will be looking to generate more income in future, which will be necessary. But in some cases, we'll have to invest in order to try and increase future income streams. Councillor Thompson.
Allow me. I'm assuming that if we didn't repair or replace it, we would have to take it away because of the health and safety aspect. That would be a not inconsiderable cost, I would imagine. So we're not just looking at this cost, we're looking at this cost as against taking it away. And it is a facility that's enjoyed by the town. Thanks. Sorry, folks.
Councillor Durham, perhaps.
Just going very quickly for the comfort of Councillor Miss White, I've looked on the John Deere website, and the electric gator is actually powered by 8 6-volt lead acid car batteries, effectively. So ordinary batteries, not the dreaded lithium. So thank you.
Right, but the obviously the cost of buying as opposed to leasing batteries is a consideration. Councillor Chairman.
Well, just in defence of the pontoon, I can understand where Councillor White might be coming from, but it is an asset. And actually, when I saw those photos of what I would call the rust, and obviously the authority can't afford to have any risk of liability for anything should something happen, it is good to see investment in Burnham on Crouch, and that is an asset that would be a shame to lose, because I know what it could be used for now. I mean, there is the taxi, or the ferry rather. There's the children's cabin. There are other vessels I've seen pull up against it, people, getting on board boats or whatever. And you do have to think of the long term in the future. It would be a great loss if that pontoon wasn't there, actually. Fundamental loss to Burnham and Crouch, in my opinion. So I was glad to see that. And the rust, the pictures of the rust indicated me work does need to be done.
Thank you. Right. Then we better move on to... we had 4 items here, didn't we? 4 different elements in this. Which page are we? Where's the start of this?
It's
Page 1.
investment strategy.
Yeah.
Appendix 3.
What's the page? Page what?
I don't know the page. 83.
83. Oh, right. It's Appendix 3 then, is the investment strategy report. Mr. Leslie, can you just summarise on that?
I gave the intro at the start to cover them all. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, okay.
That's all right.
Does anybody want to comment on the investment strategy report? Likewise with the minimum revenue provision statement, as the okay. So there were 4 recommendations to council on page 87. Yes, of course. It's, page 43.
Propose those recommendations, Chairman.
Right, I better just confirm that. Right, the recommendations were the committee considers and reviews the report and the attached appendices and approves for recommendation to council for 22-23 on 24th of February. And to the council, the following are approved: the capital strategy, Appendix 1, the capital project bids, Appendix 2, the investment strategy, Appendix 3, and the minimum revenue provision statement, Appendix 4. Right, so we go on then to item 8, discretionary fees and charges, 22-23, page 87 onwards.
Okay, Chair, I'll make it just a quick introduction on this one. The report came to members in January with the fees and charges. Since January, there have been 2 changes. One to the Hythe Quay parking, which remains unchanged now in this report. And the other one was to make sure that the coach parking was aligned with the other car parking charges. Both those 2 aspects have been updated now, and the rest of the report remains the same as that in January. Obviously, these set out the detailed discretionary fees and charges for the council.
Right. Do you have any questions? Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's questions and observations. I think this report's missed the point. The £116 that's been included in as the current charges on the Hythe Quay have never been collected. That included VAT, so it's in here, but it's not been collected historically. So historically, the barge owners have considered that fee has been encompassed as part of their wharfage. Now, I know that as a fact, as an ex-barge owner, we always used to get 2 car parking spaces on the quay, and the river bailiff gave us 2 car parking tickets that we could park on when we're using the vessels. And there's a fundamental difference between a quay and a car park. And we've got to be really clear on this, members, because this is where the strategy gets very, very blurred. A working quay, the quay in Malden's been working for hundreds of years. Okay, the cargo's changed. The cargo is now people that are brought into Malden. Topsail Charters, as an organisation alone, we're bringing in over 10,000 people into the town. Now, many of those parked at town car parks, so they made us a lot of money. So these people who are bringing in people to the town and are running heritage assets, that they're not running pleasure cruises, they're running heritage assets where most of the money is reinvested into the vessels, which means it's reinvested into the town, then they bring that money in. So we've got to get away from looking at this as a car park. There's an inconsistency in the report. If members look at point 311, and it talks about the recommendation 2, which little 2 talks about the proposal about the High Quay parking in Appendix C be consulted upon, and I just want to talk about Appendix C in a moment. I brought back to the council, etc., with a view to implementing proposed new fees and charges from the 1st of October 2022. It's in conflict with, in conclusion, 4.2, which doesn't really talk of that. They also talk on page 111, which is Appendix C. I think we need to be really mindful here, because the inconsistencies in this report, I'm just scrolling down to page 111, so just bear with me. Members, it talks about unregulated. Well, it's not unregulated because there is an agreement that's gone on for many, many years. So it's not been an unregulated agreement with no formal agreements. We talk of the second line to rectify and minimise the legal challenge from third parties. Well, I think under custom and practice, the operators there could actually put a legal challenge under custom and practice to us. So we need to be really mindful. So what I think we need to do is we need to spend more time on this. I think we need to spend more correspondence and liaising and listening to the actual operators that are down there. And remember, members, we're talking about a quay, not a car park. A quay has sales, it has crews come along, it has delivery trucks for fuel for these vessels. So you can't chuck in loads of car parks and worry about people moving them there. So the commercial strategy in my eyes is flawed at the moment. So I think what we need to do is to amend recommendation number 2, which is what I'm going to propose in a moment, to basically say, and I'm going back up to that. Pardon me, members, for the tardiness of my scrolling. Yeah, it says, it says that the proposal on the Hard Keep Appendix C be consulted upon in a separate report back to Council via the Strategy and Resources Committee. I think that's what we need to do. I don't think we should say with a view to implementing proposed new fees and charges from October the 1st, 2022. I think we need to get a sound strategy with the operators and all the key stakeholders, talk to them. Okay, don't just try and impose something on a commercial strategy that can just raise us revenue, because one barge moving away from Malden, if you take this 50-person license, 3 people per car, 60 cars, that's 50 quid a day we're going to lose out. So the more we deter people to come, the more financially incurred we're going to be. So I think it's a sound strategy to talk to the people and look at what is available to support those individuals, because I know that they will be prepared to pay to keep their businesses viable, to protect the heritage of the town. So I propose that to members that we amend level 2 on the recommendations, and we go away and we continue to consult with the stakeholders that are included. So thank you for your time, members.
Yes, Councillor, can we, before we come to trying to thinking about amending that, can we take any more discussion on that? Since Councillor Flint.
We know this is going to be an emotive issue, but I think also just for the benefit of Mr. Bird, can you hear me?
Miss Bird, can you hear Councillor Fluker?
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. We can, thank you.
That's me and Ashley will be able to hear me as well. I think this actually does what it needs to do. I mean, what this is going to do, Chairman, is bring the barge operators, the barge group into the council offices behind the scenes perhaps, and this will be thrashed out on the table, and then a decision will be made. So I think the recommendations there, the fact it says that's a good decision by council based on those discussions. So Chairman, I really don't have any problem with this recommendation. So I think it does what it says.
Right, thank you. Councillor Lagan, would it meet your requirements if we deleted the last phrase of that recommendation 2?
Yes.
Stopped at Resources Committee.
Yes, it would, Chair, because I hear what Councillor Fluker says, and I'm still very mindful about Councillor Fluker saying if the barges can go, something else will take their place, which I still am baffled by that statement, but that's in the past, I suppose. I would be more than happy to do that, because I think, Chair, that this gives us the time and the clarity to engage with those individual stakeholders and not turn around and say we will impose this at this date, because it may roll on a little bit longer. There may be other initiatives that can go forward, but I do think we should bring this back to the resources.
There is also a major side issue to this, and that is the question of parking on the Hythe by the public. Which is being taken up with the CPP, because if that would change the whole situation there, particularly if we have got any additional businesses using that area. So this question of public parking along that stretch from the Queen's Head is, it would make a different situation.
I think, Chair, just to come back very quickly, apologies, members, but you've got to look at this differently. You've got to look at like the Queen's Head of a commercial arrangement. The Queen's Head don't pay wharfage.
Yes,
Queen's Head is a completely different. You're not measuring eggs with eggs. You've got to look at it separately, Chair.
Got to look at the
So
varied
I would be very
interests.
happy if you amended that, if members agree to remember that second part on the
Councillor
recommendation.
Challen.
Thank you, Chairman. I was quite pleased to see this recommendation actually from where we were at the last meeting, because I think Councillor Swain, you mentioned the highest key as well. And we did initially say to come back with a report to this meeting. And actually, I'm quite pleased to see that there's going to be a time period to consult with the barge owners. And I saw the issue of a separate report, all these aspects I think that Councillor Lagan's referred to. I would anticipate that during sitting around the table, which I anticipate is going to happen, a lot of these issues would come out and be discussed. And then that separate report would cover a multitude of things. And then on the basis of what might come forward in recommendations, then we can consider at the time. So I would hope it is a very full report that covers the aspects that Councillor Lagan's raised in terms of the parking. That's how I read it, actually, that a lot would be covered. It wasn't just going to be hurried now and come back to this meeting. When I read that, I was quite warmed by it to see that there's going to be a period of time with the barge operators to discuss matters.
It's a question of what consultation means and how that's carried out, isn't it? So shall I move from the chair that we delete that last phrase? Oh, sorry, Councillor Thompson.
Sorry. Yeah, I hear what everyone's saying, and I certainly agree with it. I just don't think it. I think it's a good idea to have some kind of deadline, something to aim at. So I would actually amend the last phrase, or suggested if Councillor Lagan would agree, with a view to implementing a new strategy on fees and charges from October the 1st. I think it does need looking at, and it needs consultation, but I wouldn't like to see it wandering on forever. I'd just like to see it closing date.
Good. Councillor Nunn?
Well, unless I'm misreading this, it's a bit of an odd recommendation, isn't it? Because on the one hand, it's saying, let's consult with the barge operators, and then it's saying, with a view to implementing the new fees.
Yes.
So that's a strange kind of consultation, because it appears that the decision's already been made.
Yes.
So I agree that that we should remove that final line, but perhaps change it to read with a view to implementing a new strategy.
Or
sorry, did you say that? Yes. I agree with you.
Right.
Thank you.
right. So, Councillor Lagan, you raised this initially. How would you formulate this change then?
Well, I did do exactly what Councillor Thompson and what Councillor Nunn have said. I just amend that little part at the end to say strategy.
With a view to adopting
a new strategy.
In relation to. Well, okay, in relation to a new strategy.
A new strategy. Okay. Because you've also got to realise that there's within the negotiations there's been talk of AMPR number plate recognition systems being set up on the quay. So come on, let's get around the table with these guys and give them some credit.
Yes. Okay. Right. Well, we seem to have an agreed amendment to this. Is that generally agreed? Yeah, great. Thank you.
Chairman, sorry to interrupt. Can I just confirm we're taking the date off that recommendation? Yes. You're just adding the word strategy, new strategy.
With a view to implementing a new strategy.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Right. Anything more on this particular item? Yes, Councillor Fluker.
Sorry, just wanted to go to page 99. We have a very, very emotive discussion about fees that the barges pay. It's what I know that they've given a huge discount by this council, regardless of the fact that the high key is going to mean an awful lot of money spent on it. Now, I am mindful, Chairman, of the information that the members have given, which is private fast facts council going to be looking black holes accounts £400,000. Whilst I don't want barge operators to close that back up for us. I think it's only right to all the residents that our fees and charges, these are assets which belong to everybody. This, I fully understand, Councillor Beckett's argument, one much Kitty went to which I understand to go anywhere. I think it's subsequently for sale. But, you know, these companies, the operators are businesses, Chair. And today, I was looking at public records that came in this house, and I was delighted to see how well some of these operators are doing. And in particular, some of them, their net assets and shareholder funds have actually improved during the period January 20 to 21, but no loss to their asset values. So that means to me that even during a particularly hard year, they were still doing incredibly well. And this council mustn't be seen to treat one business different to another, although I know there is a balance about all businesses going into this district. So, Chairman, my proposal would be, to be fair to everybody, is to, given the barge operators give us such a substantive discount in annual fees, that this council, at the very, very least, increases them by inflation, because the costs of maintaining the key are going up by inflation all the time. There will come a time when they'll have to do it piecemeal by the inflation rate. I think that's the right thing to do, and that's what my proposal is. I'm happy to make it as meeting chairman and also full council, because I know at the time that the awful lot of other operators on the river felt as though they deserved discounts as well, but they didn't. I forgot to turn my microphone on, so Councillor Boyce won't be able to hear me.
When you say it's a discount, that's part of the issue, isn't it? What is it discounted from? And the base on which it's discounted would be part of the discussion about the whole issue of charging for barge operators, wouldn't it?
But Chairman, if I can come back, I mean, there was Mr. Holmes in this, there's an awful lot of benchmark with other ports on the East Coast. So we've got, look, it is, in my mind, and I've got to say, I know how much these things cost, but in my mind, that represents a very, very good price. And if that's the council's will to agree to that, then fair enough. But I think for all of the taxpayers in the district, at the very, very least, it should be, for want of a better word, indexed to at least have the inflationary figure put to it. And as I said, from the information I've read at Companies House, these businesses are trading quite well.
Okay, well, we'll come to that proposal in a minute. Councillor Labour?
Yeah, and thank you, Chair. Thank you, members, for letting me come back. There's a couple of flawed statements in Councillor Fluker's statement there about the benchmarking exercise, because the benchmarking exercise that was underdone with wharfage was underdone with places like Shotley Marina, St Catherine's Dock in London, and in Malden you tie against the concrete wall and slap a rope on a bollard, and you might get a bit of water and electricity. So we're not measuring eggs with eggs there, Councillor Fluker. I think I don't actually disagree with increasing by inflation for the barge owners, but I don't think we should sit here in this committee and turn around and drop another little bombshell on them. I think what we should do is leave with the support that we've given, which is a good level of support, but I go back to the amount of revenue and the amount of tourism that they bring into the district, and from next year within our fees and charges apply the rate of inflation for a period of 5 years, and then review those prices at that time. I think that allows surety in individuals to be able to plan for their businesses. It shows we're being fair and equitable, and we're supporting the heritage assets that are on the quay, and they are a unique part of our history. We sit in this chamber looking at papers, they've got logos on the top of them. You look behind the top table, you see the assets there, and the assets on balance sheets would be, because they're quite expensive assets, so they're worth a few quid.
Okay,
Thank you.
I think the question of comparison with other places is all part of reviewing consultation and a strategy for barges. It is an important aspect of it, I think. So can we take Councillor Fluker's proposal then? This is just for the current budget then, inflation increase?
But based on what Councillor Mackham's made an excellent proposal, he's supporting me putting up the fees for the barges. So I'll amend my proposal, Chairman, to what Councillor Mackham proposed, which is basically from April 23, the barge mooring fees increased by inflation every year. So I'm grateful for that, and I'd certainly support the proposal.
I just have to come back because I do like the enjoyment that sometimes I'm not supporting Councillor Fluker's proposal in any way, shape or form. I'm supporting a fair and equitable measure within an individual business.
Next year,
and
you wouldn't usually vote.
well, we can agree to disagree, Councillor Fluker, because I'm sat here. I will listen to the tape, but I don't want to take these assets away. But I think it's a fair thing for us to reach. And I'm sure the barge owners would understand that. But don't forget, not every vessel is a commercial entity. There's 2 vessels that are operated by trusts down there.
Yeah, okay, right, thank you. Yes, Mr. Leslie points out that we really should only be talking about the increase in fees for this next budget year, rather than talking about for the future. So can we amend that we say we want to increase the fees for 22-23 by the rate of inflation, which is what has happened in nearly all the other cases of increased fees. It's been.
Can I just say the car parks actually, and that's what I'm looking at, appendix, can't read now, appendix B, actually the car parks, etc., high key parking are not going up. It's only the prom park that we're now bringing into line. I would much prefer to see, let us have this consultation, let's listen, sit round the table and let that come back, Chairman. And then that, I think what could happen is like halfway through the year or whatever, I don't know, I'm not going to see any, judge anything, but I think it's important to get that whole report, the separate report back, covering the aspects of the proposal of Councillor Thompson's, which I thought had been agreed by the committee, and moved on. But okay, that's my view.
We had 2 separate ones. One is this request for a report on a future strategy fund, and the other more specific one from Councillor Fluker that we increase the fees for 22-23 by the rate of inflation. Right.
Chairman, sorry to interrupt. Can we Councillor Fluker's proposal? I'm not sure it's been seconded.
No.
Can I make a proposal that we recommend that the 2.1 is proposed and accepted by the members as part of the recommendations detailed on the paper, please, Chair?
Seconded.
Which was the first one? I think we need to do what's on the table. Councillor Fluker's was first on the table.
Yes, right. Well, we're counting the amendment to eliminate the deadline and a call for a new strategy as having been passed. We now need to a seconder for Councillor Fluker's.
No, sorry, Chair. There's been a proposal raised by myself, which has been seconded by Councillor Nunn.
No,
so
well,
that should be
Councillor
voted upon.
Fluker
It wasn't seconded, Chair.
So Councillor Fluker's proposal for fees for 22-3 to go by a rate of inflation has been seconded. Can we have a vote on that? We're just talking about 22-23.
Can we record that vote, please, Chair? Thank you.
Okay. Recorded vote then, please, Tara.
We need a seconder for recorded vote.
Seconder for the recorded vote?
Yes, seconded.
Okay. Right. Okay, Tara. So it's 4 against the amendment of Councillor Fluker, seconded by Councillor Durham, that the barge fees increased by the rate of inflation for 22-23.
I'm being thick. Please apologise. I apologise. So Councillor Fluker just wants to agree the little one, 2(1), that we agree what it says, but at the rate of inflation. Is that right, Councillor Fluker? From 22-23.
Which we'll discuss after the arguments.
So, Chairman, in respect to the recorded vote, are we just voting on the amendment to the appendix, or are we actually going to vote on the
This was meant to be a vote on Councillor Fluker's recommendation concerning the increase in fees for 22-23.
Right, so just that the appendix be amended to increase the barge fees by the rate of inflation. Okay.
Oh, I see. You amending point 1. The detailed fees and
Yes.
charges as set out be
Yes,
agreed.
Chairman.
Except
So we're
that.
just agreeing that amendment. We're not actually agreeing the whole
No,
of that recommendation.
that's what it would be. Right. Do we agree
Yeah.
this amendment to the first amendment to the first recommendation? For the detailed fees and charges as set out in Appendix A, except that the barge fees be increased by the rate of inflation.
Is it?
Sorry, Chair, for clarity, I think we're just dealing with the text barges in particular, the mooring fees, not all of the fees and charges.
Yeah.
That's what I said. And Miss Bird is nodding.
That's my understanding, Chairman. It's purely that we're amending the barge fees to the rate increased by the rate of inflation, and then subject to that being agreed or not, we would then vote on the agreement of the appendix.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Right. So
Yeah. So you're happy for me to take recorded vote, Chairman?
recorded vote on the increase.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry, Chairman, but can I ask what exactly which rate of inflation we're talking about? Because it changes all the time, and I'm sure Mr. Leslie has a point in time at which it's fixed. And could he please tell us how much that is?
Yes.
We're voting.
Could you tell us, that would be very helpful, Chairman, what the amount is now and what we're talking about? Councillor Mrs Thompson.
We've already voted an amendment to recommendation 2. This is an amendment. This is not an amendment to recommendation 1. It is a motion in itself, really, to a recommendation in itself. Sorry.
Should I just provide that clarity?
Sorry.
Should I just provide the clarity around the?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, certainly. We use it's 3.2% to be consistent with the others. I think that's documented in one of the appendices as well. It talks about inflation. Thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, can I come back? How much are we talking about for a barge? Ish.
3%, 1,700 quid.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Six barges.
Right. We take it as a separate motion then that the barge fees be increased by a rate of inflation for 22-23. Okay. Yes. And you wanted a recorded vote on this.
I don't think you can take it as a separate motion. I think you need to take it as an amendment and then vote on that amendment. And if that amendment fails, then we vote on the original or and adjust it.
Well, shall we leave it in abeyance until we finish talking about that appendix? If there are any more questions to be raised on it.
I think we're taking it as an amendment, as Councillor Leggan says, and I think Tara just needed to call out the names and then we can.
Yeah.
We can do
Well, it's not an amendment. Isn't it?
Yeah, we've taken it as an amendment, I believe. So that's fine.
What Councillor Fluke has raised is
Okay,
raised an
there's
amendment to recommendation 2(1), and that's the amendment that Councillor Fluke has made. So that amendment, we need to vote on that.
Yes.
And I've asked for a recorded vote, which has been seconded by Councillor Nunn. So if that fails, then we go back to this or another recommend, whatever we do. But we must vote on that as Councillor Fluker has raised
Okay, well, there may be
that increase this
further
year.
amendments then. But,
That's
right.
That's right, Chairman. There can be further amendments.
Sorry.
We deal with this amendment once, and then that then becomes a substantive motion, and then we move onwards.
Well, this is just one amendment. There may be others.
Yes, this is just the one amendment. So the amendment to Appendix 1.
An amendment.
Okay.
An amendment to recommendation little 1. Then.
Yeah. Yeah, to increase the barge fees by the rate of inflation.
Right. Thank you. And
Okay.
if you call for and against that, then.
Yes, members, if you can indicate for or against or abstain, please, when I call your name, starting with Councillor Mrs. Channer, please.
Abstain.
Councillor Durham.
For.
Councillor Fluker. Councillor Laggan.
Against.
Councillor Nunn.
Against.
Cornesy.
Against.
Councillor Stamp.
Against.
Councillor Stevens.
Against.
Councillor Swain.
Abstain.
Councillor Mrs. Thompson. Councillor Miss White.
For.
4. The Chairman, the results of that are 4 for, 5 against and 2 abstentions. So that is lost, Chairman, that amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, can we have any further comment on Appendix A, then the fees and charges?
Yeah, I'd like to retract my proposal, and I amend my proposal to accept the recommendation 2(1) as detailed in the agenda papers.
Well, this is. Yeah. Well, if nobody wishes to make any further comment on fees and charges, I'll take Councillor Lagan's move to pass that recommendation. Agree. Thank you. We've already dealt with little 2. Right. Thank you. Can we move on to item 9 then? Medium-term financial strategy on starting page 113.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Following on from the all-member briefing I gave in January, the figures remain unchanged, and you can see the areas are now coming forward in formal reports in terms of the figures I provided at the time. Table 1 of the report in section 4 details the budget changes over the next 3 years and the increase in the budget gap forecast therein. Next year, a drawdown from the general fund balance of £452,000 is included in the budget, with this rising to 1.6 million by 24-25 if no action is taken and assumptions remain the same. This is despite a £5 increase in council tax included in the forecast. Table 2 provides a summary of the growth items included in the forecast, with the detail at Appendix 2. These remain unchanged from those presented to the committee back in January. Paragraph 6.1 attempts to quantify the impact that COVID has had on the council's ongoing financial position and shows a potential impact of £700,000 next year as a result. Table 4 shows that the council's projected general fund balance based on the funding gaps shows that by the end of 24-25, the balance would fall below the recommended minimum level of £2.6 million. Although balances are currently sufficiently high to manage a drawdown next year, the increasing gap and ongoing need to draw down reserves will need to be addressed quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie. Yes, clearly the figures and the diagram after next year are alarming, but obviously that's in a do-nothing situation. So it builds in certain things that we can be fairly sure of, but there are a lot of uncertainties, and Mr. Leslie could recite all of those. But it does point out that we need both to generate more income and also to improve the capital reserves. Comment from members then. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I accept everything that's said, and I'd like to say I'm more than happy, but I'm not happy because I don't like the look of the figures. But I would certainly accept the recommendation. The only thing I would say, and I'm not planning anything clever, is that should circumstances change drastically between now and the actual budget meeting, I might need to change that. But as things are, I certainly accept the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. First of all, Mr. Leslie, thanks for a really concise and good report for non-financial brains like myself. Do you think that there would be any more funding, and I'm asking you to get a crystal ball here, from the COVID release pressures? Do you think central government would release anything in the next 1-2 years that may come forward to help?
I don't believe there will be any more COVID-specific support provided from what already has been provided. The question mark about funding for me is around the service delivery grant, which is worth about £100,000. That's really only a one-year grant. We don't know where that's going to go and how it's going to be distributed next year. We've had a one-year local government finance settlement again, so we have that uncertainty. So that's a potential area where we could benefit. Also, the new homes bonus is another area. The consultation around the new homes bonus has been out, and feedback has come back. So we're waiting to see what shape that will take going forward. Clearly, we've got nearly £1 million of new homes bonus within our funding for next year. So how that shapes will be very important for us going forward. We're projecting that that falls by about £200,000 to £300,000 for us next year. It has been the highest level of new homes bonus we've ever received next year. So that's clearly a volatility risk for us. It could be better or it could be worse. I see those as our key government funding areas. In terms of the local funding, business rates and how that shapes will be another one for us as well to watch, and how our businesses develop. So certainly in terms of collection rates, although there are some signs that the economy is recovering and we're starting to pick up lost arrears from past years as well. So I see those as the main areas.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Darren.
Well, thank you. Chairman, I mean, these figures are very sobering, aren't they? And we're not alone in this. Certainly all local government is facing the same thing. We wanted a 3-year settlement. We didn't get it. We have a 1-year settlement. I honestly don't believe that there is going to be any additional money coming from the government, and certainly with the levelling up white paper today firmly indicating that the government are going to put more money into the Midlands and the North and not concentrate as much on the South, I don't think we can rely on anything. And you know, we are under inflationary pressures, and we're under pressures from the increase in national living wage, etc., etc. And I'm afraid the cold facts of life are we either have to raise more income, and that's our opportunity to do that is fairly limited. We have to find efficiencies, and certainly the low-hanging fruit in terms of efficiencies was picked long ago. Or we have to look very much at the services, and we have to look at how we deliver our services to our residents, and you know, we can't, unfortunately, rule out reductions in services and cuts. We have to be realistic, I'm afraid, but it's very sobering.
Yes, indeed. Yes, Councillor Channer.
Well, just to say, Chairman, I thought that was a very good report. I have to say, I thought it was easy to, I agree with Councillor Egan, easy to read, and I actually was reading, I think, the clear message that Mr. Leslie was giving in that as the 151 officer,
yes,
and highlighting the concerns and what it would mean if we don't do really a sustainable budget now. We have to balance the budget, but we're talking about sustainable here as well, I believe, and where that would end up if we don't perhaps act sensibly at this point in time regarding, because when you look at the graph that we've all, I'm sure, seen, I think you can see quite frankly where we are headed in that time period. And in the 3 years, as Mr. Leslie's pointed out, what could happen. And as a 151 officer, he is clear we have to have the 2.6 million there. So I thought it was an excellent report. Thank you.
Yes, it sort of emphasises the need to try and balance the budget for the next year, 23-4. Councillor Fluker.
Yeah, thank you. Business rates is brilliant. When we had this committee many years ago now, it feels like, with the old CFAS building, huge lesson whereby the responsibility for paying the business rates or the NDRs was given to a ghost company. None were paid. And this has been dragging on for a long time at that time. But then strategy resources asked for officers came along to go long-term performance so that we could understand what was going on. And as I said, I know that this is busy, but I think it would be a good idea perhaps for the next meeting if we could try and but it's the bigger picture of this. You know, what we're actually looking at here is running out of money. We're probably looking at devolution. I know the great advocate of devolution, Steve Clark, is now back in the cabinet, so Treasury, and he was a massive advocate of this just at the time of COVID. So I'd like to think that the council is looking at devolution, because I think we should be open and not led. It's always my thought too. And I think that the other assets to see how we can perhaps, I know we don't to see how we can maximise the income from those assets. And the other thing is this building. It's our biggest asset, and I think that during the pandemic, I think perhaps following on from the pandemic, working methods changed dramatically. I think we need to get back on fire on this building. If so be, it should be disposed of, and that money should be invested in something that's going to give us a return. Otherwise, if you look at this basically, 5 years time, there's nothing left. It's as simple as that. So we can deal with 5 years, but there is nothing left. So we need to provide something that's quite valuable, and we need to start doing that for the next fiscal year in April. Otherwise, it'll be another year gone. But we need to do this. We started to do it a couple of years ago, and I know it's been going on for that, but we need to accelerate this process. Now's the time to accelerate it. Otherwise, it's my great comment. It won't be, if we merge with Braintree or Tendring or anybody else that's trying to take us away, if that was to happen, it won't be a question of what is the Thames barge. It'll be a case of where is more. People say they can't hear you. Well, that's it.
Yes, I agree. There are one or two things in terms of fairly short-term possibilities for efficiency or reducing costs, but also there are a number of bigger projects that are being looked at, which would generate capital for future capital budgets, and which should also yield some future incomes from various types. Whether they match up to the requirement is another matter. But there are a number of things that are being looked at, including major ones. Councillor Stamp.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to look for Mr. Holmes to help on this one, if he's still there. What Councillor Fluke has said is absolutely spot on, but I'm not sure how much can be said in council about this building. I think conversations have taken place. I think Councillor Durham's on it. Councillor Fluke has started it, I think, when he was the leader. When I was the leader, we were discussing it. And I totally agree with what he's actually said. And I'm sure, because I've been trying to make sure it comes to council, because I'm a great advocate, these decisions need to come to council as soon as possible, and not small working groups of a chosen few. And I think that needs to come through very quickly to council. And I would urge Mr. Holmes or whoever, if they can look at that, or the new leader, actually. I'm so sorry, Councillor Channer, you're the new leader. So sorry, it wasn't being rude. If that could actually come to council very soon, because I was being a little bit flippant there. She knows I wasn't meaning it, but I think it's really important, and he makes a very good point. The working practices have changed, and we have been looking at it, and I know that there's some officers done a great deal of hard work behind the scenes, and one's actually sitting at the back, I think, and it does need to come to council. It's no good as just having working groups and meetings if we're not going to bring a paper to council. So I actually do agree on the odd occasion with Councillor Fluker.
Perhaps I can actually defer to Mr. Holmes to how far what we can say on major projects.
In case I say too much.
Or do you want me to?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, absolutely. There's corporate projects working group is looking at a number of projects, including some major projects. Some of them obviously are commercial at this time, but nonetheless, there will be a report to council, and a briefing is actually being arranged for members ahead of that, so that we can bring all members up to date. Give you an assurance that it's at a very early stage. We're exploring options, particularly around this building. I think it's fair open to say that, you know, we recognise that there's a potential options around this site. So all that will be coming before members, but through the working group and then back to council.
Councillor Chandler.
Just to say, Chairman, thank you for that, Mr. Holmes. And Councillor Stamp's fine by saying what she did, because I think she would know probably we do think alike on some things. I've had similar conversations. In fact, I've had conversations recently about working groups, and I have a view on working groups, but I also have a view on making sure all members are informed and things are done in council that need to be done in council, Chairman.
Yes. Well, Councillor White, I think. Not my fault, no.
Oh, well, I've got a really loud voice anyway, so I'll just speak up. Right, now, basically, my issues are that every time we have these budget statements, if I've been elected, we are going to run on a more financial basis, we're going to balance our books, we're going to increase our revenue, which is fine. And then all of us, I am just as bad as every other member, have our own pet projects, and we always say, but we just need this 60,000 or 100,000 for this project, and we have to supply this for free for that project. And I just think that looking at these figures, we've got to get real. It's like our own bank accounts. We suddenly have to think, although we want to give that away, we really do have to run this on a financial basis, and we do have to increase revenue. Otherwise, we're going to go bankrupt. That's the fact of the matter. And then we'll have no Malden District Council, and we need to keep Malden District Council because it's important. So we need to get our spending within our budget, which unfortunately we're not very good at doing. And I say I have my own vanity projects, so I can't talk. It's not, you know, any one thing. And also every time this comes up, we're always told, no, we're going to have staff freeze. We're not going to get any more staff, and then every 6 months that's overruled and we have a lot more staff. That's one thing that always happens. We've had officers who are going to increase revenue, but so far I don't think the revenue's increased any more than what the wages are. So I think we need a really in-depth look at this to try and get this on a basis where we're actually going to see that the council is going to be run like a private company to some extent and make an income, not just through car parking, not just through planning, which are the two usual ones for increasing fees, but we need to be really strategic, and we need to see what bang for our buck we're getting. You know, as I say, we need to think, is this financially viable? If it is not, we have to stop doing it. You know, we need to get tough to keep this council here. We must keep Malden District Council financially sound, and so far we're going through money at a rate of knots. I don't know what the answer is, but let's all pull together and try and fix it if we can.
Yes, I would say that through various recent S&Rs and finance working groups, we have constantly paired items off the agenda, expenditure items, and where staff have been taken on, it's really to be able to maintain the service that we're committed to. But you're quite right. But whether one should really look upon the district council solely as a commercial business is another more wider point.
But we also have to be careful that we're still here. We have to spend
indeed.
within our means. It's not just about being a corporate. We have to suddenly think, if we've got £1 million to spend, we have to get within that budget somehow. We have to do it so we don't go bankrupt.
Yes, we have to do some fairly fundamental changes.
Really, really important.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fluker.
Yeah, very quickly, Chairman. Thanks for letting me come back. It's all very well rehearsed words. Councillor Stan picked up on my word advocate so many times earlier on. She didn't pick up on the acceleration. I think that's the important thing here. And it's clear that you're obviously doing a lot of work behind the scenes, but I also think that it's important, even if that's all still work in practice and commercially sensitive. I still think that it should come back to this committee in its early stages, then go to council, because it could be another 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, or whatever. So I think, Chairman, just to help you,
actually. That's what it is we've just passed. Right, MTFS. The recommendation that the updated MTFS strategy for 22, 23 to 24, 25 as of today's date at Appendix 1 be approved. Agreed. Right, thank you. Then we want item 10, which is on page 175, revised 21-22 estimates, the original 22-23 budget, and the council tax considerations for 22-23.
Agreed. Agreed.
So Leslie?
Did you want to say something?
No, I know what I'm wanting.
Well, okay. If you agree to put those through to council then. Item 11 then, Treasury Management Strategy. There's nobody is querying that then. Okay. No. Councillor Fluker. Indeed, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is a very good point to make.
I would point out that he has made a statement along the lines that we've been talking about as Section 151 officer. Was that in the MFTIF or the minimum revenue statement? Somewhere, I think it's said in this MTFS. So that's statement as Section 151 officer should be attended to.
Yes, all of that, Chairman, but I have just had a message from a member of the public, excuse me, I'm eating chocolate, who can't hear a word Councillor Fluker is saying. There may be those out there who are grateful, but this particular acquaintance...
I don't know, perhaps it'd make a difference if Councillor Fluker sat down nearer the thing with you. I don't know.
Anyway, thank you for letting me butt in. I apologise.
Chairman, I think Councillor Thompson needs to take a foot off the cable to stop Councillor.
Item 12 then. Thank you.
Sorry, carry on. Item 12.
Yes.
That's all. Oh, it is.
Right, item 12, just to get off the finance for a moment. A review of memorials and cemeteries. This is going to be, report's going to be from Mr. Holmes.
Thank you, Chairman. Members recall at the last meeting you looked at this report and asked for some additional details and some consultation to be carried out. Since that time, Debbie Horry, our cemeteries officer, has been undertaking that work, and Ms. Horry is on the line now, and I think she will actually give members the update on the information they were seeking.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Horry?
Okay. So since the report was presented last month, I've had an opportunity to consult with the Friends of Haybridge Cemetery and with Carly Mays, who's the chair of Malden Friends Group, and we've been able to add a couple more recommendations. Most of the report has remained unchanged, other than the main differences being that we're recommending that the lease period be for 10 years rather than for 5 years, and that we're very clear that the new scheme is talking about benches that we're going to install moving forward and not going to be looking at things retrospectively, so it won't affect people who have purchased a bench in the district up until now. The only time we would look to remove those benches would be if they had fallen into disrepair, and that would be after testing them with our new scheme in place. But everything else is kind of remaining the same.
Mr. Holmes, that doesn't, nothing that Ms. Horace said alters the recommendations we've got on the agenda, does it?
No, those recommendations have been crafted around and include the comments that have just been made.
We have some comments. Councillor Chandler.
Well, not a comment, Chairman. I think it may have been covered by the officer, actually, because I read the report and I wasn't quite clear what had come out of the discussions with the Friends of Heybridge, and also Carly May as the chairman of the Malden one. So regarding the points you've just made, they were the only things really that were critical out of that consultation. So we've encompassed really every thinking that the Friends groups came up with, and they're happy with the proposals as are. Because I think you said in the report it mentions you shared the report with them ahead of going to this committee. So could we just have confirmation on that?
Yes, absolutely. They've seen the report and put recommendations in, and moving forward, we're going to make sure that there is always proper consultation with the Friends groups, and we're in talks at the moment setting up regular meetings with the operations manager, myself and the Friends group, to make sure that anything that happens within the cemeteries they are properly consulted with.
Okay, Councillor Chan? Councillor Nunn, yes.
Yes, thank you. A good report, and obviously very thoroughly investigated. I just feel I do need to say this though, that it's important talking to the Friends groups, but they're not the be all and end all. The most important people here are the bereaved, and we shouldn't underestimate the sensitivity of this, particularly as it relates to Roman numeral 2. And from a historical point of view, of course, these plaques are a historical record. You've only, I mean, I know we're not responsible for these particular benches, but you've only got to look at the benches outside of All Saints Church in Malden to realise that's the fact, that they are a historical record. So it concerns me a bit, really, that this is almost kind of suggesting that after 10 years we can kind of move on with the bereaved. And what happens to these plaques? And unless I've missed it, I'm not sure what's happening with the plaques after the 10-year period, please. Thank you.
I'm not sure, Ms Horry, whether there was some idea that they would be moved to a different location but still retained. Is that right?
Absolutely. We would consult with family. So if after the 10-year period the family no longer wish to lease a plaque onto a bench, we would consult with them. They would have the right to have them returned to them. But alternatively, we have a memorial wall in Malden Cemetery, we have the chapel wall in Heybridge Cemetery, and a pergola in Burnham and Crouch Cemetery. There's also talk of memorial areas within Promenade Park. So we would be looking to keep the plaques. As Councillor Nunn rightly points out, they are a lasting memory of those people, and we wouldn't want to take those away. What we're looking at is having a system where we can make sure that the benches that people are using, all the public are using, are safe and fit for purpose, but certainly not getting rid of any of the plaques.
Very grateful for that reply. Thank you.
Councillor Logan, then? Oh, okay, Councillor Durham first then.
Thank you very much indeed. Again, an excellent report. Looking at the picture on page 261, certainly looks like a plastic bench. Can we just have a look through the report, and it may well say it, that the plastic bench is made from recycled plastic? That would be advantageous, please.
I think that is the idea, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's fine. She's nodding. That's absolutely fine.
Yeah, we'd certainly be looking to use the recycled plastic benches where possible. They are more environmentally friendly, and I think you'll agree from the pictures that they look better than they sound. But we have got a caveat in there saying that certainly in certain areas we would be open to consultation, and I think, I'm sorry, I missed that from that. It was one of the key points that we discussed with the Friends group, that in certain areas, particularly in cemeteries or in places of historical interest, there would be the option for discussions, but generally speaking, we would look to use the recycled plastic benches.
Yeah, but there's much less ongoing maintenance, and they last a whole lot longer. Thank you very much.
Any more questions? Kevin, Councillor Logan?
Thank you, Chair. Well, again, I'll conclude with the fellow members. Sorry, the very, very good report, and things have moved immeasurably since you've been in post, so thank you for that. And I will say how I see it. I don't like sharing benches with plaques. I think that when somebody's bereaved and they want to have a memorial for somebody who they've loved, maybe they want to sit in a quiet place and contemplate that person, you know, you walk past some of the benches and they've got bunches of flowers on them. You know, those memories to that individual person are very, very special. And I understand the purpose of the report, but I don't know. I sometimes think of my late mother, and if a couple of people who'd passed away at the same time, if she was on a plaque next to them, she'd be wriggling around in that. I'll tell you, she wouldn't be happy. So I'm a fan of giving solitude to a single place. I know there's complexities within that, and I think we do need to look at the structure of the benches moving forward. But I really don't like and can't support, I'll be brutally honest with you, the sharing of those memorials on a bench for a set period of time. It's a bit like the horse troughs in Malden and Haybridge. You know, back in the day, if they'd have been thinking like that, we wouldn't have had those. So while I get it, it sits very uncomfortable with me, and I can't support it.
And well, if I might, just as a rejoinder there, the horse troughs and things like that were for the community, weren't they?
Well, for the horses, I think, rather than the people. Yeah. Yes, they were, but yeah, it's that. You know, I'm sorry for being flippant because that was uncalled for. But it's the point is, and Councillor Nunn has said a very elegant thing about the historical value to that. But I go from the emotional aspect of it. You know, when you sometimes read some of those things that people put on there, intensely personal to those families and those individuals. And Malden's as a family, and Burnham and all the different areas in the district, we can't have benches every 5-6 feet. We know that. I think we need to look at that strategy, memorial walls, bricks, those types of things. But if someone wants to have a place of solitude, I think that's only right and respectful in my eyes.
Yes, I think the one of the points of the approach is to have some control over where benches go. Or from our part, but it is very sensitive in that they are what should we say, communal burial grounds, and the having privatizing, should we say, an area with a bench is a bit of a conflict. It's conflicts with the communal aspect of, and so sharing a bench is sort of communal rather than being sort of felt to be some particular property in that area. Councillor Durham?
Yeah, thank you. I take on board what Councillor Lagan has said. I mean, my late father-in-law was put in there not that long ago, and at some stage my dad will join him, or somewhere around there. I'm just wondering whether we can give the option of having a single plaque on a bench, but charging a premium for it. You know, then we you know, that we're offering a service to everybody, and you know, I'm sure there are people that would be quite happy to share a bench and therefore the costs. But if somebody desperately needs a bench to themselves, well, then there's a premium price to be paid for that.
I think that's rather sort of buying space, isn't it? Which space would be rather limited, because there's obviously a limit to the numbers of benches that's practical to have. But yes, Councillor Swansea. Okay.
Thank you. I actually agree with Councillor Lang and Councillor Durham. I think if you want the bench and you're quite prepared to pay for it, I don't know if anybody's been watching Afterlife and the series of Afterlife 3. Absolutely brilliantly written by Ricky Gervais, and touches on some very, very what's the word? Thank you. Sensitive points, and I agree with Councillor Lagan.
I think a main point of this is people won't buy the bench. The benches will be the district council. Is that
No,
right?
they can buy the bench. They can buy the bench. They buy the bench and the service. And if you want to buy your own bench and sit there, I think you should. You would never turn around and say nobody can sit on this bench. You're not going to turn around if somebody wants to sit with you and say you can't sit on it. I've paid for it. It's to actually think about, mull over, reminisce, enjoy whatever the feelings are at the time. And I agree with Councillor Lagan. Sorry.
Right, Mr. Holmes, do you have?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm sure Ms. Horry will comment, but my understanding is this is about space now, because obviously we have a lot of demands for memorial plaques, if we have benches with just one name on, there's probably going to be 2 or 3 other people who won't be able to take advantage of that. So I think the idea being that we actually allow more than one to actually deal with the demand, which doesn't mean we have to keep putting in more and more benches. And we are looking at other options. So, there are memorial pathways we're talking about, and also we've got the wall that was mentioned. But so I think we're trying to find a balance, give people options. But if we start having exclusive benches again with one plaque on, even if it's a premium rate, it won't help with us trying to meet our demand. I think that's a concern.
Councillor Shaughnessy.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I can see that we're likely to be inundated with benches. I believe I mentioned this at the last meeting. And I think this is an interim measure, having, 3 plaques on a bench, before we can maybe afford to have memorial walls, memorial paths, etc. Going back to previous speakers, Councillor White, for instance, we can't do these things if we can't afford them, but we can look to them in the future, these other memorial options. But I see this very much, this proposal, as an interim measure until we can get those others underway. Thank
you. Yes, no, I imagine that it is an option, the investment cost of something like memorial wall would, in effect, in the longer term, be covered by payments for plaques, which were removed to there. Councillor Durham.
Chairman, thank you for letting me come back again. I think we just need to think about, why people want a plaque on the bench. Now, is it because there is no other record of the fact that their remains are in that cemetery? Because we have a new, very, very pleasant area where we're now interring cremated remains, and there is the opportunity for people to have a headstone, if you like, there. So, perhaps if a family has that and has somewhere to go and sit and their name is recorded, that would suffice. There are others, I think, perhaps, that where the ashes are just spread in the flowers and in the rose beds, and there are little plaques as well. So I'm in 2 minds here, and I totally take on board the fact that if there's 1 plaque per bench, we're going to have too many benches. But if the price is priced accordingly, I think that would control it. If you have a high enough price, you're going to have a limited take up of it, but it still gives people that option.
Is it okay for me to
yes,
speak?
Sure, yes.
I think what we've tried to do with this report is to think about those people who can't necessarily afford to pay over £1,000, and by having more than 1 plaque on a bench, it enables the cost to be much lower. So it's a scheme that's available for more people than the current scheme that's in place now. It's for cemeteries and for all open spaces, and there's some areas, such as in current burial areas or Promenade Park, where there's high demand for benches, which we cannot meet. And at the moment we have waiting lists for people where we're unable to put enough benches in. And if you think about in current burial areas where there'll be a row of grave spaces and there'll be around about 12 graves in that row, if there's only going to be 2 benches, that means more people are missing out than those who are able to take advantage of the scheme. So what we're hoping is that we'll be able to accommodate more people so that they can have something rather than a select few at the moment. So that's the idea behind it, to make it an affordable option for people, as well as being able to accommodate those people on the waiting list.
Can we turn to the specific recommendations that we have here? That the sale of benches as an individual item available for purchase, which are then installed in our parks and open spaces, cease. That a new scheme be introduced where customers can lease a plaque on a bench for 10-year periods. that the updated memorials and cemeteries, parks and open spaces policy, Appendix C, be agreed and implemented no later than 1st of April 2022, that the new scheme be introduced with effect from 1st of April 2022 and will not be applied retrospectively.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, I just think we should agree this option here. I do agree with it. But two other options have come to mind. One is, I know in the working groups we discussed having plaque trees for putting the plaques on. I wonder if we could progress that further so people can buy a branch to put their plaque on. And the other thing, because if we need to increase the revenue, if we're short of space for benches, we could pick a very large amount so that people could buy a very expensive branch for 10 or 20,000, and then that would help cut our budget deficit.
I'm not sure whether you mean a natural tree or an artificial one with.
It was artificial, the one that but it could also be real.
Yes. Well, Miss Horry will probably
Yeah,
think about
absolutely. No, it's absolutely. I'm really glad that you've mentioned that, because we've got some fantastic ideas that we want to introduce into the cemeteries, and one of those does include a bronze memorial tree. We're hoping in the next year or so to have designated scattering areas. We're looking to have Woodland View with one of those trees, but as I'm sure you'll appreciate, it's been difficult the last couple of years with the pandemic. And getting on top of things, but I will certainly be looking forward to coming back to speak to you all about some of the great initiatives, columbariums, memorial trees and other things, so to have as many options available to our residents as we possibly can.
Brilliant, thank you.
Right, Councillor Fluker. Councillor Fluker.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The great benchmark for this is to try and get it absolutely right, to provide the best possible opportunity, but also raise the most revenue. Nobody does it better than the City of London Corporation, in particular, the City of London Cemetery. If there is working, I'd urge them to go to the City of London Cemetery, and all of the things that Miss Harris mentioned, and more. They will see. They've really got some wonderful things there, and also across the whole of the religious spectrum, because we must lose sight of that as well. We are a cosmopolitan area now, and I think it's worth going there. See my grandfather in Law's picture there with two horses as well, Chair.
Oh, I think Miss Hurry then perhaps ought to make a trip to the City of London Cemetery.
It'd be wonderful. I would love to.
Can I just ask me? Are you going to the funeral exhibition in June at Stoneleigh? Because that's an exhibition that has all of these things on display. I will be going, but if you're... So, no, I mean, it is a good opportunity to look and see what is available for memorials at Stoneleigh in June.
Thank you. Councillor Langers.
Thank you, Chair. I sit here and it's slightly distasteful with some of the comments that are made about charging somebody 20 grand for a tree. I get the intent, but let's strip it right back to what it actually is. It's a memorial for somebody who's died, somebody who's walked the earth, who's loved, and people want to remember those individuals. So there should be a fair price, but I'd hate to see us try and commercialise the hell out of this. I think what Councillor Durham said was actually a good solution for everything. If that was entered in, and there could be a structured fee, and I'm not saying a premium of an extortionate amount of money. I'm saying a fair amount of money that somebody could pay to have a single. Although in my mind it does exclude people, but it also gives people like myself, who are not on the higher end of the earning scale, the ability to rent a plaque if necessary for a loved one. So I think we just need to tread a little bit carefully in the debate, and I like the fact there's all the other options that we're going to have and how to memorialise people, but let's not strip it away from the fundamentals. This is about people at their worst time, remembering somebody who's walked the planet who was loved.
Councillor Nunn.
Well, absolutely. I was going to say exactly the same. Well, not exactly the same, but very similar things. But can we then perhaps agree these recommendations, but with an amendment to little 2, which picks up on Councillor Durham's suggestion that actually a structured fee structure is introduced, which recognises the volume of plaques per bench. In other words, you could actually put a plaque on a single plaque on a bench, or you could put a plaque on a bench with a series of plaques. So some kind of structure to it. Yeah. Subject to availability.
That's effectively giving somebody the right to pay to have their own sole plaque on it, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's availability is the question. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. And I think, yeah, you just hit the nail on the head that people would be paying to have some sort of advantage over everybody else. And I know that happens in all sorts of things, but it feels uncomfortable to me in this particular subject. And as we've said, subject to availability. So if you've got one person that's perhaps prepared to pay 3 times more for their own bench, and then you've got 3 people over here who don't want to and they're happy to share a bench, but you've only got space for one bench. Now what do you do? And I think if we were going to vote for that, we'd need that answer in place first. Thank you.
Yeah, and I might come back, although my comments might have been facetious, that's what I meant, is that if somebody wants their own bench, it's going to have to cost, otherwise you're going to stop several people having other benches. It has to be fair, and there has to be a way of splitting it.
Just take a comment from...
If you want a private plaque on a private bench, it's going to have to be, certainly more, otherwise it will stop other people who can't afford their own bench having any form of plaque at all.
Yes, I think that's all a question of availability of benches, isn't it? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the rub is in the subject to availability. Unfortunately, it's a fact of life that the number of people who we want to remember can only ever increase. And the space seems to only ever decrease. While I've got every sympathy with the idea of having one plaque on a bench, I just don't see how we can do it. It's part of the existing problem we're looking for a solution for. Unless we could have chairs, of course.
Yeah.
But I don't know, is that even an option? You can have a single chair, which would cost a bit more than a bench, obviously, but...
Can I ask Mr. Holmes to
otherwise I couldn't really
try and comment on this?
Perhaps
we can try and wrap this up.
Thank you, Chairman. I think essentially what we're saying is, demand outstrips supply. Yeah. If we start going down the route of having exclusive one plaque, one bench, we're going to be very quickly back to where we are now. And I perhaps feel that we should provide a scheme which is accessible to all, that people can afford and is reasonable. And I think you've heard about the other options that are coming up. There will be other ways for people to memorialise, and some of those may be more expensive than others. But I think as a basic bench with plaques, it should be as open as possible. And it would cause us great difficulty in trying to say, yes, we're going to put one name on there for price, and then other people are turned away. And I feel that will be difficult for Debbie to administer. So
absolutely, 100% right. Yep.
Councillor Chandler, one last comment?
Yes, well, thank you. I think what Councillor Shaughnessy said, this is a scheme that's coming in, but clearly from what the officer said, we're going to have looks at other things. And I've just Googled some stuff on memorials, and actually there's some, well, this is the wrong word, I've got to be careful what I say because I've lost people. But actually, it's quite exciting when you can see some things that can be done to actually have plaques on board in a smaller place. So I think to go ahead with this, because I take the valued point about, I can see where Councillor Durham was coming from, but it does concern me then other people will lose out. But it doesn't mean to say going forward there might be an alternative and that can be embraced later on, but with the other ideas coming forward. So I'm content to go with the recommendation as is, recognising that officers have told us they're looking at other means for memorials, and also then that might allow the bench scheme to be adapted in due course. But I think for now, I will tend to go with the officer's recommendation.
And I'll second that.
Right, okay. Can I move all these recommendations then? Seconded by Councillor White. Okay, is it agreed?
Yeah. Agreed. Can you record that I dissent? No, I'm not in agreement. Just put it
certainly.
In there. Just
Tara, record that Councillor Lagan disagrees with the recommendation.
Yes, of course, Chairman. Thank you.
Right. Item 13, any other item of business is urgent, and there is one which was circulated earlier concerning new grant scheme, new money for grants have come up. So perhaps Mr. Leslie, can you just give us the rundown on that?
Thank you, Chair. So we've received additional funding from government in light of the Omicron variant. The extra grant is for businesses so that we can award further grants to those who have been affected by this particular variant, predominantly those reliant on social indoor mixing, hospitality, leisure events, and the accommodation sector. For that, these are discretionary policies, so we do require approval in order to distribute those. The other area we received grant for is in the ability to award business rate reliefs to these businesses as well. So it's essentially why we have two policies here today. One is for grants for businesses, the other is to award relief for local businesses. We also have, just to draw your attention as well, on page 19 of the supplementary pack, there is, in paragraph 4.3, there is a percentage figure still to be determined. This is in relation to the business rates reliefs. How this will operate is that we will have the applications come through, and we're looking to maximise our grant allocation and the amount we can give to those eligible businesses. And once we have an idea of the number, we will then change the percentage accordingly. Of course, the idea being that we can provide maximum benefit to the local businesses through the scheme. On that part, in terms of eligibility, each report sets out the eligible businesses. In there, we've got page 10, for example, paragraph 3 tackles that, and as you can see, it reflects those businesses which the government has highlighted as particularly impacted by the Omicron variant. The recommendation is also for delegation to be given to vary these if needed. We do have a track record now of distributing grants, I believe, quite effectively to those businesses and being quite responsive along the lines of amending the policy. So we've got that corporate knowledge built up of who may be in need and who may be eligible. But nonetheless, we like to be as flexible as possible so that we can maximise those businesses who need it. So in short, these policies will allow us to get the grants out to those businesses who need it as soon as possible.
Questions? Councillor Nunn?
Yes, I think I know the answer to this, but just for the record, for the minutes, please, could Mr. Leslie confirm that parish councils are not eligible to make a claim for lost revenue, for example, in terms of hiring of premises? Thank you.
There are a number of schemes, but if I might just refer to Ms. Lamar just to confirm.
No, that's correct. They are ineligible.
Ineligible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stab.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just say well done for applying the grants for ever since COVID. I think this council's worked really hard. Some of the staff have been under tremendous pressure to try and get them out. We showed a great deal of due diligence by checking before we actually started handing the money out, because I know that some councils did and then they had to pay it back because they were so quick to pay it out. So I'd like to congratulate the council. And also, again, now is this information and policy going to go on the website so the businesses are actually know what they're doing? Because I'm sure Councillor Channer, Fluker, Durham, White and everybody else sitting around here, Lagham and everybody else. I always call you Lagham, don't I? I always get you... So sorry. Oh, God, how long have I known you? Get loads and loads of emails and inquiries about grants. So as long as this can be really easy to find on the website, it will reduce our post bags tremendously. So, but well done. Thank you very much. Please note that I think all of us as councillors say thank you for doing that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think we have quite a good track record on this kind of disbursement of government grants.
Yeah, agreed.
Right, can I move these two recommendations then as, better read them out, that the additional restrictions grant policy at Appendix 1 is approved and delegation is given to the Director of Resources in consultation with the Leader of the Council and the Chairman of the Strategy and Resource Committee to amend the policy to respond to business need. And secondly, that the COVID-19 Additional Relief Fund policy at Appendix 2 is approved and delegation is given to the Director of Resources in consultation with the Leader of the Council and the Chairman of Strategy and Resources Committee to amend the policy to respond to business need. Okay. Right, thank you very much. Now we come to item 14, the exclusion of the public and the press. To resolve that under section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A to the Act, and that this satisfies the public interest test. Seconded, Councillor Channar. Agreed?